Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome a well respected U.S. Army veteran, a leadership expert, and an author from Florida, USA, Lieutenant Colonel Oakland McCulloch. Oak, welcome to the
How
show.
you doing, Ash?
Uh, Oak is an author of a book titled Your Leadership Legacy: Becoming the Leader You Were Meant to Be. He is now an internationally recognized keynote speaker on leadership and success, and he spent 23 years in the Army, where he has held numerous leadership positions in the infantry and armor branches. So, Oak, my first question for you: you began your career at West Point and later commissioned as an infantry officer. What inspired you to choose the military as a path?
So I played sports as a kid, all my time as a kid. I played baseball, basketball, football, and I ended up being the captain of my teams, and then I was also the student government president and class president, and so I had some leadership,
Yeah,
rudimentary leadership, but I dabbled in it a
absolutely.
little bit as a kid. And so I knew I wanted to be a leader. I knew I wanted to lead people. And so the natural thing that took me was to the military and
Hmm.
being an officer in the military. So I made that decision about my sophomore year in high school, I think, is when I decided I was gonna one way or another, I was gonna be an officer in the Army.
Hmm. Okay. And how did your experiences in Operation Desert Storm, Bosnia and Kosovo, shape your leadership style?
Yeah, well, I think it started before that. I kind of, I knew that the best leaders I ever worked for were servant leaders. And so I kind of was trending that way, and I've always kind of trended that way. But during those deployments, you quickly figure out that the key to success is to take care of the people that you have the privilege to lead. And it
Hmm.
is a privilege to be the leader. And I think too many leaders today have forgotten that it is a privilege to
Hmm.
be the leader.
Hmm.
But, when you're sending them out on dangerous missions or out, into the cold for uh, weeks at a time where they don't get a hot meal. And I mean, you start to realize that they're the point of the spear. It's not
Yeah.
you. You can write the best plan in the world. It doesn't matter. They got to execute it, and they're only going to execute it if you take care of them to the best of their ability. They'll execute it better if you can take care of them.
Hmm.
That doesn't mean you baby them,
Yeah.
but you give them the things they need. You When you can give them a break, you give them a break. All those kinds of things that just help motivate them, help revitalize them.
Right.
When they start to get run down and
Right.
all those kinds of things. So I really took a lot of time to get to know the men and women that had the privilege to lead, so that I could tell when I needed to back off a little bit, let them take a little break.
Hmm. And, transitioning from the army to civilian leadership, and I've seen this with several army officers who have transitioned in India, from a world of very high discipline to the corporate world, you moved to the Bay Area Foods Bank. What challenges did you face and how did you adapt?
Yeah, it is a challenge. It absolutely can be done because leadership is leadership. I don't care
Correct.
where you learned it, I don't care
Correct.
where you practiced it. The principles of leadership are the same, and they will always be the same. So, but how you communicate them and how you implement those principles will absolutely change based on who you are leading.
Hmm.
I certainly didn't talk to people at the food bank, the volunteers at the food bank, the same way I talk to my soldiers.
Hmm.
So, you got to learn that. I think one of the big things is you got to realize you got to put your ego aside.
Hmm.
When I went to the food bank, I wasn't Lieutenant Colonel McCulloch.
Yeah.
I was Oak McCulloch. They could have cared less that I spent 23 years in the Army. It didn't mean anything to them. Some of them had never even spoken to a
Yeah.
soldier before. So that did not impress them one bit. So
Hmm.
you got to go in and you got to start rebuilding you got to build the respect, you got to earn their respect
Correct.
and their trust. And I think that was the hard part. But the hardest thing for me was this. It was, in the Army, it was a mission. And it didn't matter if it took us 3 hours to accomplish that mission or if it took us 3 weeks to accomplish that mission. We were on it till we accomplished the mission. At the food bank, at 4 o'clock, people were going home.
Yeah.
It didn't matter. It didn't matter what was going on. At 4 o'clock, it was time to go home. And that was hard for me to wrap my head around.
Correct. Absolutely. Oak, now let's talk about your book, Your Leadership Legacy, Becoming the Leader You Were Meant to Be. I'm going to ask all our viewers and listeners to go and check out Oak's book. I'm going to do the same. My first question is, what inspired you to write Leadership Legacy?
Yeah, so I've wanted to write that book for a long time. And I knew what the title was going to be because, again, the way I look at legacy is it's a two-part thing. So a very small part of your legacy is what you actually accomplish in your job.
Correct.
As the leader. And I say that has to be the smallest part because when you leave that position, and you are going to leave at some point, you're either going to retire, you're going to get fired, you're going to quit, you're going to get promoted, or you're going to die. But one way or another, you are going to leave that position.
Correct.
And when you do, and the new person comes in and they change everything, then what's your legacy? Now it's their legacy, not yours. So to me, the legacy is that leadership that you pass on to the next generation of leaders, that next generation of leaders that you help develop, coach, train, in your leadership style. And for me, like I said, it was servant leadership. And then they train the next generation of leaders, and they train the next generation. That is your legacy. You could affect not only your company, but the country or the world for many generations if you concentrate on that being your legacy, not on what you accomplished.
Right. Great response. Many people equate leadership with position or title. How do you define true leadership?
Yeah, I don't think that title has anything to do with it. And if you don't believe me, there is that thing out there that I think we underestimate vastly, the informal leaders, the ones that don't have titles, but people are still going to get answers. So I don't think titles have anything to do with leadership. You got to have them. I got it. I'm not saying we shouldn't have them, but that is not what leadership is about. Leadership is about people and trust. Period. End of story. Full stop. If you understand it's about people and trust, you can lead any organization, regardless of your title. Regardless if you are the highest boss. If you treat people right and they trust you, then lots of times they'll come to you rather than maybe the biggest boss because them get things done where the other one doesn't. So you got to understand it's about people and trust. And I think if you understand that, you can lead any organization. I don't care what it is.
Correct.
And I kind of proved that. 23 years as a combat arms officer in the Army. When I retired, I ran a food bank. You don't get any different than that. That's 180. I didn't even know what a food bank was, except the food in it. That's about all I knew. And yet, when I took over, we were handing out 1.2 million pounds of food a year.
Wow.
When I handed it off 2 years later, we were handing out 3.8 million pounds. We doubled the size of the truck fleet, and we almost doubled the size of the staff. Amazing. Because it's about people and trust.
Correct. Well said. You also emphasize character in leadership. How can young leaders build a strong character early on in their years?
Yeah, I think that it's vital. If you want to be a leader, I think character is one of those things, and to me, it's all about values. However, and there's lots of ways we learn values. Most people, a lot of people equate values with religion. And a lot of our values do come from that, and that's okay. But you also learn them from your parents, your grandparents, from school, from
absolutely
lots of different places that you learn values. But I always tell young leaders, I tell everybody, but certainly young leaders,
Mm,
every time you're going to do something, go back to your values. Does it, what you're about to do, line up with your values? If it does, then it's probably okay. If it
mm,
doesn't, then you probably need to rethink that.
yeah.
Because here's the problem. I see it all the time, and I know you did in your career. People are trying to get to that next promotion, that next spot,
Mm, mm,
and they compromise their values to get that next promotion.
right.
And every time you do that, it gets a little easier to do that. But
Mm,
here's the problem. 20 years from now, when you get where you wanted to be,
mm,
you look back and you don't like who you are, what did you gain? And I see it all the time.
mm. Well said. What role does humility play in effective leadership, especially for those people who are in positions of authority?
Yeah, I think humility is vital. You don't have all the answers. You
Yeah.
don't have all the knowledge. You don't
Mm,
have all the skills. I
mm,
don't care how long you've been doing what you do. Somebody has more skill, knowledge, and ability in some parts of what you do.
mm,
And again, back to that ego, you got to be willing to put that ego aside and use those skills, talents, knowledge, ability, and not only use them, let them use those skills, but you have to acknowledge
mm,
when they do it. Give credit where credit is due. You know, my first job in the Army, I was a platoon leader, an infantry platoon leader, had 32 men I was responsible for.
mm,
I show up first day, and my platoon is already out in the field doing some stuff. So they drive me out there, dump me out at lunchtime, said, "This is your platoon, good luck," and drove away. My platoon sergeant, I was a 23-year-old lieutenant. My platoon sergeant walks up to me, grabs me by the shoulder, and I could see him like like it was yesterday.
mhm,
6'5", 120-pound country boy from Mississippi.
mm.
He grabs me by the shoulder and says, "Sir, pick up an MRE. Let's go have lunch." And we sat underneath the tree. And he said to me, he said, "You know, sir, you're the boss. You're in charge. We'll do things however you want to do them.
Mm,
However, I've been in the Army for 23 years." He had been in the Army as long as I had been alive.
right.
Would you not listen to somebody like that? And he said, "I've been in the Army 23 years. I've seen it done every which way it can be done. If you're messing up, I'm going to tell you.
Yeah.
If you still want to do it that way, we'll do it that way. But if
Mm,
you're going to mess up, I'm going to tell you that's my job."
mm,
And I give Sergeant First Class Pinson a lot of credit for helping to develop
yeah.
me into the
Mm,
leader I became.
amazing. I wish more young people had people like the person you met to guide them early on in their career.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
Oak,
We
what
need
is
it.
thank you. What is one leadership mistake you frequently see being made in the corporate world, and how can these mistakes be avoided?
Yeah, that's an easy one. Micromanagement.
Okay.
I see it so
Yeah.
much today. And even in the military today, I see a lot of that going on,
Mm,
unfortunately. And micromanaging is evil. It is absolutely evil because not only do
correct.
you cheat that person out of that experience, you cheat everybody who's going to work for that person out of that
Mm,
experience. They don't
mm,
have it to pass on. So you could be affecting your organization
yeah.
for the next 10, 15, 20 years.
Mm,
And I had a boss one time, a great mentor of mine. He eventually retired a three-star general. And he told me one time, he said, "Oh, leadership is on a scale." And he said, "On this end of the scale, you have that micromanaging, authoritarian, do it exactly as I tell you to do it leader." And he
mm,
said, "And nobody likes to work for that person.
yeah.
Nobody." He said, and no creativity happens there. Why would they? Why would they come
Mm,
up with any? Just got to sit there and wait for you to tell them what to do, when to do, and how to
mm,
do it. And if it doesn't work, they can blame you because I just did what you told me to do. No
right.
creativity happened there. He said, on
Mm,
the other end of the scale, you have Attila the Hun and chaos, controlled chaos, but chaos. He
mm,
said, and you want to be as far down that road toward chaos as you feel comfortable. He
mm,
said, because that's where creativity happens.
mm,
That's where you other people's skills, other people's knowledge, other people's abilities,
mm.
and you will be amazed at what they will do for you. And I always remembered that, and I always try to go down that road. And he told me, he said, and the way you get there is you build the culture of the organization, so you know people are going to make decisions inside your framework.
Mm.
You train them to the standard you want them to meet, so you know they can do what you're asking them to do. You give them the resources, you give them the authority to make it happen. That's where others fail. And then you get out of their way. Will they do it the way you would have done it? Absolutely not.
Right.
Who cares? The analogy I always use is, if we got to get to the number 9. Why do I care how you get me to 9? 7 plus 2 is 9, but so is 6 plus 3, and 5 plus 4, and 8 plus 1.
Correct.
I don't care how you get me to 9. Get me to 9.
Amazing. What role does communication play in building trust within a team?
Yeah. When I give my keynote talk, the very first thing I say is, the number one factor that's going to determine whether or not your organization has the possibility of being successful. And I say possible because there are no guarantees. I don't care what you do. The possibility of being successful is leadership. The number 2 factor is the quality of communication in your organization. And you got to be transparent. If you want to build trust, you got to be transparent. And you got to be honest. And that means you got to take responsibility for bad decisions you make or mistakes you make. Look, none of us are perfect. I keep trying to convince my wife I am, and you would think after 38 years I could convince her, but no, she's still not buying it. We're all going to make mistakes, and the people you lead understand that you're going to make mistakes. As long as you're honest about it, you're transparent about it, and you admit it, they're going to forgive you. If you try to hide it or you blame it on somebody else, that trust is gone. And once trust is gone, it's over. Because that's what allows the leader-led relationship to happen. Without trust, the leader-led relationship falls apart.
Very well said. How should leaders handle failure, both their own and failure of their teams?
Yeah, absolutely. And we're all going to fail. You should never be accepted it drives me nuts when I hear a leadership, somebody talking about leadership, and they say failure is a good thing. Failure is never a good thing.
I agree.
I'm sorry. That's ridiculous. Failure is never a good thing. Does it happen? Yes. And when it does, and I tell people, you treat failure and success the same way. I don't care. When either one of those, you learn from it. So what was I supposed to do? What did I do? How can I get better at it? And you might have to hold somebody accountable for that failure. It might be yourself, but somebody might have to be held accountable depending on what happened. But you learn from it, you fix it, you learn from it, and you move on. And if you're successful, you should think that same reflection piece, that same what was I supposed to do? What did I do? How can I get better? Because even if you were successful, doesn't mean you can't be better at it.
Correct. Time for a few more questions for you, Oak. You've led in combat, disaster relief, and education. Which environment tested your leadership the most, and why?
Well, dealing with 18, 19, 20-year-old young men and women tested me quite often. But what was the hardest was probably the peacekeeping operation. And I will tell you, because you're kind of stuck in the middle there. You're there, and both sides, they don't really want you there, but you're there, and you're trying to help them, even though they don't think you are at the time. But I'll tell you, my disaster relief, the 2 hurricanes that I helped on, helped me with my peacekeeping mission, prepare me for the things that I had to deal with, the crisis, the lack of this, the lack of that, whatever it was. But peacekeeping probably was the hardest mission I ever did.
Amazing. You've trained and mentored hundreds of cadets. What qualities make you confident that a young leader will succeed?
That's a good question. I've had my hand in commissioning over 600 lieutenants for the United States Army over my career. And, the things that I always looked for, I guess, probably 3 things: self-confidence,
Mm.
You know, and I
Yeah.
understand there's that line between
Sure.
arrogance and
Yeah.
self-confidence. And I'll tell you, my personal opinion, I'd rather have somebody step over that line into arrogance every once in a while than not be self-confident.
Correct.
Because
Correct.
if you don't think you're good, why should anybody else?
Absolutely.
And if you don't think you're good, I promise you the people you're leading won't think you're good. So you got to be self-confident.
Mm.
Got to have a winning attitude. It drives me nuts when somebody tells me, well, that's good enough. That's never good enough.
Absolutely.
It, yeah, when you run out of time and you got to execute, got it. That's as good as we could get it. But if there's more time, you make it better. You know, so you got to have that winning attitude. I don't care if I'm playing old maid with my 11-year-old granddaughter.
Mm.
I want, okay,
Correct.
that's just ingrained in me. I want to win. Now you're not going to win every time, and you got to
Absolutely. Yeah.
deal with it. But you should have that desire to win all the time,
Mm.
and then desire to serve, because that's what leadership is. It's selfless
Mm.
service.
Mm.
Believe that
Very
100%.
well said.
And if you don't believe that's why you want to be the leader, if you want to be the leader for you, go do something else
Mm.
because you're never.
Great response. I have time for two more questions for you. What can corporate leaders learn from military leadership practices, and what should they not copy?
Yeah. Um, I think the taking care of people is one that I think the military
Yeah.
has down pat. You know, our motto, you know, mission first, because you got to accomplish the mission, but people always. So I think, you know, even in today's military, where that has slipped a little bit from when I was in, it's still there, and I think that's something that corporations, companies need to understand, because too many companies out there, and I go around and do
Yeah.
leadership development programs for companies, and I'm here in New Philadelphia, Ohio, to do two talks tomorrow for a company, not
Hmm.
for an associate conference, but a company. And too many companies out there today, they look at it as mission. I got to accomplish my mission, whether that's make money, whatever it is
Yeah.
that they decide their mission is, and take care of people. And they think they're mutually exclusive, where
Mm.
I think they're like this.
Yeah.
The more you take care of the people, the better your mission accomplishment is going to
Correct.
be, because they're going
Mm.
to work harder. This is not rocket science. If somebody likes coming
Yeah.
to work, they're going to work a little bit harder.
Mm.
They're going to want to do what you're asking them
Absolutely.
to do.
Yeah.
If they hate coming to work, good luck. I mean, I don't know how you do that. So those two things, I think, is is something that the taking care of people, and then the mission oriented piece. We got to accomplish what it, you know,
Mm.
results do matter in the real world. You know, we could talk about everybody being a winner and everybody
Yeah.
getting a trophy. Want that's fantasy land. That's not real. That's not
Mm.
where we work, where we live.
Mm.
Got to be mission oriented, and I think the military is very mission oriented, and I don't think always that companies and
Correct.
corporations are. And
Correct.
but the one thing, to go back to the micromanager, I think I see that creeping into the military, and that is, and it is rampant in the civilian world,
Mm.
and we got to do away with that.
Mm. Well said. And my last question for you, as you look at today's young generation, what excites you the most about the future of leadership?
Yeah, that's a great question, and you know, I'm not one of these. There are lots of things wrong with this generation,
Yeah.
this young generation. Let's not kid ourselves.
Mm.
A lot of it is our problem,
Yeah.
our fault, because you reap what you sow, and we have not
Correct.
sowed very well.
Mm.
So if you got problems with this younger generation, look in the mirror, because
Mm.
we're the cause of it. We allowed it to happen. Having said that, I'm not a doomer. I don't believe every young man and woman is horrible and can't do anything, because I've
Mm.
seen better. I know better than that.
Yeah.
I've seen those superstars out there, and the ones that are that impress me, that give me faith, are the reason it gives me faith is because they're of their curiosity. They want to know. You know, they as a young man, I very rarely ask the question why.
Mm.
When somebody told me to do something, I did it.
Mm.
This generation wants to know why.
Mm.
And there is nothing wrong with that. It just took a couple of years for this old man to figure out there's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with an 18-year-old coming up and asking me why.
Mm.
But what I figured out is if you can tell them the why, if you can explain the why, you got them. They'll do whatever you ask them to do.
Correct.
So I think the curiosity piece of it really gives me hope. And then the other piece is that they want to succeed. Now, the way they want to succeed is not the same way that you and I probably wanted to succeed. We were 18, 19, 20-year-old.
Correct.
Just starting out in our careers. But they want to. They're figuring out different ways to make things happen with technology, with the artificial intelligence, with Chat GPT, with, my son. If he's got to do something, he pulls out a YouTube video and figures out how to do it.
Yeah.
So in their ability to take other people's lessons, other people's ideas, and put them to use really gives me a lot of hope for the future.
Very well said. Great response. And on that note, Oak, I just want to say what an amazing conversation this has been. Thank you for talking to me about your own incredible journey. Thank you also for speaking to me about your book, Your Leadership Legacy, Becoming the Leader You Were Meant to Be. We covered some fascinating ground on different aspects of leadership, and you really brought across your perspective of leadership that you learned in the Army, in the US Army, and how those perspectives are becoming of incredible value in the corporate world. Thank you for speaking to me, and good luck to you.
Thank you, Ash. I appreciate you having me on.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website, www.tbcy.in, to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.